Hey everybody, welcome back to another Film of the Week video. Hope you guys have been enjoying the content on the channel as of late. I'm going to be a little bit quiet because it's going on midnight, so I'm going to be as quiet as I can. So hopefully you guys can hear me through this video. We're doing another Film of the Week, and hopefully by the time this video comes out, there'll be a collection of familiar names, as you will. There's one film that we talked about, which is Sympathy for the Devil, and now we're talking about I Saw the Devil, and in the next video we have another devil titled film. So three films back to back which have devil in the title. But I Saw the Devil, which was directed by Kim Jin-woon, I believe that's his name. Not familiar with his work, so this is my introduction to him as a filmmaker. Tells a story of a serial killer who tells a story. It tells basically two varying perspectives of a particular incident. So there's a serial killer who has this craving for brutalizing his victims in very horrendous and graphic ways, particularly towards women, which we'll get into in a second. But one of the victims happens to be a wife to a particular individual, and this individual takes it upon himself to enact revenge, and proper revenge, as he puts it, revenge that equals the pain of which his wife suffered towards the killer. And the film is a exploration really into the effects of violence and the becoming of what you hate. The messagings of like monster, becoming the monster to fight a monster. And also a lot to do with the cruelty usage of said violence through certain individuals. One of these individuals is using it for what is portrayed as some kind of heroic endeavor, where the other is much more villainous and sadistic and quite I'm not sure what the word would be, because I'm fairly uncomfortable coming out of it, because for starters, I will say that it is consistently investing, and it has a tone to it that is just incredibly rich in tension, because there's little room for you to breathe, because it is, as it's pitched, as a thriller, but ultimately what it is actually a horror film, because there's the way that the characters move around, the way that the camera itself follows these characters, and the brutalization and the depictions of its violence. They don't come across as within the genre that it is. It feels so much more in horror, and much more in the context of torture porn, if you guys know that term in cinema. Because it is greatly, when it comes to this violence, it is like torture porn by definition. And that to me is where I get to a very, very questionable and very uncomfortable sensibility that I believe the film is bearing, which is the brutalization of not only women, but just the pleasure that it takes in the presentation of its violence. To a certain measure, it makes sense to why you would want to be this grotesque, and why you would want the imagery to be so upfront and so brutal. But when it is taking its liberties and showing these ideas through the context of women, almost always, it does bear a few questions, and I do believe that the film can be, I wouldn't say offensive, but I feel like that there is, those phrases came to mind, like, this is kind of vile, this is nasty, this is inappropriate, like that. Those kinds of ideas definitely lingered in my head when going through these sequences, because the thing about these sequences is that they're filmed with a certain intent. It's not with the this is, wow, look how gross this is, look how ridiculous, look how traumatic this experience is. There's a certain pleasure that's taken with these sequences that I just found really, really gross. Like, it's aggressively pleasurable, and I found that to be very, 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 very unwarranted, and again, I think can be taken offensively. And it was like I actually was just found myself looking away at some of these sequences because of just how brutal the film takes in showing these. Like, there's sequences of rape, there's sequences of just, just like, again, just torture porn, where it's just picking at certain features of women with arms, and it's just, it gets really, really like I said, again, it's just like it takes a certain pleasure with these sequences, which I find to be very, very problematic, and I think that calls for a lot of questions in terms of the optics and the lenses that are being taken with this. But I can't sit here and say that there aren't other things to the film that are noteworthy. For starters, I think that it's visually stunning. I think that there's some shots that are just seared into my head. There's a shot in a tunnel that I thought was just brilliant. The last shot of the film, really, with I won't spoil anything, but just, it's a revenge story, so I think you can put together what the end results are. But the end shot of the film, I think, is very, very haunting, because it puts it all in perspective as to what we've been building up to. The idea of you becoming the monster in order to defeat a monster. It's just, there's certain stuff like that. And also, to an extent, with the brutalization, there are shots in there that are just, that will, they're in my head, and they're, it's hard for me to remove from my mind. But I take great issue with the brutalization. I take great issue with the violence that's at the center of it, because it's not violence, and also it's just in general with the violence. Like, when the action sequences happen, there's there's a bit of disbelief that has to be taken, because the husband who loses his wife to this serial killer, he ultimately becomes like John Wick. I mean, he somehow can kick and flip and do all these crazy stunts. You learn that he's basically an agent. He works with the police force, which I guess gives him some kind of a scapegoat, but it still feels a bit. You're still a bit in disbelief of like, okay, I'm not sure how he's able to do all this stuff, but it's just that the details of how it chooses to, like, just the amount of detail of said violence, I think, is interesting, but the overall depictions of said violence and the way that they go about the brutality of it all, and the suffering of women at the center of the film, I feel is very, very questionable, and very, very I feel very unwarranted, because the villain of the film, it's not a character that I just hate. It's a character that I just found very, very despicable and hard to watch. Like, again, there were points where I just had to shield my eyes just because of how pleasurable and how aggressive it goes with showing these sequences. Now, the performances at the center of it, with the villain in particular, I think is brilliant. Because the idea of it is to hate that person, and that performance, not only am I hating that character, but I am also believing 100% that character is who he says he is. I do believe that how despicable and how nasty and how just all the pure evil, and that is what that performance is, and it's brilliantly done through that particular actor, and I think that really, performance-wise, he's the standout of the entire film, because you hate this person, partially due to how brilliant the performance is, but also with just how the craftsmanship is handling such a character. and it's just that, you know, it's not a film that I would say is without merit, but it's also a film that I'm struggling to also recommend, because I don't want to have these sensibilities be completely, could be completely, justified. Because I found the film to be to be fair. I think that, like I said, it has a consistent flow and engagement. I think the performances, like even with the John Wick type character, he's engaging to a point. And I think that visually it has a lot going on, and tonally it has such richness and tension. Like I found myself like jumping at certain points because of how well how all these sequences are built and how structurally it plays along. But I'm having a very, very hard time digesting the brutality, the violence, the depictions of it, the like I said, the pleasure that it takes in the brutalization of women. Like I take a very strong offense to it, and I don't know if I can recommend the film because of those sensibilities being in there. Because other than that, there are interesting things there, but it's hard to recommend a film when it's so intently wanting to present certain kinds of depictions and certain behaviors as a result. So it's a nasty piece. It's a I would say fairly offensive film, but it also bears technicalities and an aura to it that is mostly engaging. But I feel that the violence of it is firstly exaggerative, extremely exaggerative, but also just unwarranted in terms of, number one, just the fact that it's gender oriented, that it's just strictly the brutalization of women. I just find that to be very questionable. But also just the manner, I just take issue with almost entirely. It's like, do we need to have this amount of exaggeration? Do we need to see these sequences played out over and over and over again? And for like maybe once or twice, I felt, okay, this is setting a tone. But as time went on, I just got this overarching sense that it's not just setting a tone. It is, it's sending some kind of message within it, which is that it has a pleasure of showcasing these scenes and not doing it for the right reasons. So I think it's very questionable in its sensibilities, but in terms of technicalities and narrative, just narrative interests, there is merit to it. But I don't know if I can recommend the film because of how fairly offensive that I think the film is. So that's my thoughts on I Saw the Devil. I think that it's a nasty piece, and I think that it's just unwarranted in terms of its depictions. But you guys, let me know your thoughts on I Saw the Devil. Did you guys like it? Did you guys not like it? As I said, I ultimately find it to be fair, but I struggle with giving it any more praise because of its depictions of things. But you guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And that's gonna be it for me, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you cannot stomach a film like you really need to have a good stomach to watch this film, because it is brutal. So just note that it's not an easy film to watch. So, but yeah, those are my thoughts on I Saw the Devil. So you guys let me know your thoughts, and I'm gonna go cleanse myself now because wow. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next video.